Seeing none. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the minutes of the June 23rd, 2023 meeting as presented? Moved by Kevin Hunt, second by Councillor Tadison. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none. All in favor or opposed? That carries. All right. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the delegation request for today's meeting? Councillor Tadison, Kevin Hunt. Any discussion? And that any opposed? That carries. So we'll start with delegation 6.1, Ankur Sagar with Relectra Energy Inc. respecting a municipal solid waste solutions proposal approved at the June 23rd, 2023 meeting. Ankur, could you please address the committee, please?
You guys hear me? Good morning, everybody. How are you? So I'm just going to give you guys a quick 5-minute presentation on our process and what we're planning on doing with the city and what we ask for the city to help us out with. Appreciate you guys taking the time to hear me out today. My name is Ankur Sagar. I'm the CEO and founder of Relectra Energy. We're a recycling and environmental company based out of Brampton. We do work in Guelph, in Cambridge, Toronto, and in Hamilton with the private sector. Today, I'm also going to be introducing my partner company, Techum Recycling, and their rotary kiln controlled pyrolysis waste to energy process. I'd like to share my screen real quick and show you guys, just to start off with some of the success stories that we've had with Techum in Europe. These are not all of Techum's plants, but as you can see that there are over 504 waste to energy plants in Europe in 2020 alone, up to 2020, and collectively they have redirected over 100 million metric tons of waste from landfills directly to recycling plants or waste to energy plants. You can see in 2019, Belgium, Finland, Germany, Austria, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden all have less than 2%, let me just scroll down here, less than 2% of their waste was sent over to the landfills. The rest of the 98% was either recycled or sent to waste energy, which in turn was used to produce thousands of megawatts of green electricity. And then coming back real quick before I go to the next slide, coming back to what we plan on doing in Ontario. We want to start off here in Ontario alone, through data published by the OWMA, which is the Ontario Waste Management Association. Ontario's diversion program sends about 27%, or about 3.5 million tons of Ontario's annual 11.6 to around 12 million metric tons of solid waste to US landfills, primarily in Michigan and in New York. The OWMA also reports that Ontario, with the current capacity that we have in our current existing landfills, only has about approximately 123 million metric tons of capacity left. And that window is closing fast due to the increased amount of population that we're getting every year. Just last year alone, we had 500,000 new residents in the province. And so basically what we're trying to address here is that we can't really push this conversation any further. We'd like to work with the city and try to come up with a plan right now, as it is going to take time. It is probably going to take 3 to 4 years for paperwork, approvals, building, and operating the facility. So we're going to talk about our solution real quick. I'm going to introduce my partner company, which is Techum. They're primarily in the EU. And basically what they specialize in is high temperature controlled pyrolysis. Relectra and Techum, we're ready to introduce a high temperature controlled pyrolysis facility here in Hamilton. We've been looking at a few locations, nothing solid as of yet, sort of just doing baby steps for now until we get into the more of a major decision-making opportunities. Let's scroll down here. These are the various types of, we want to start off with the municipal solid waste, although the system can be added on, components can be added on to treat, as you can see here, contaminated oils, contaminated water, oil sludge, basically all the waste that's produced in Hamilton's industrial sector, where we can safely either convert it back into energy or properly recycle it in-house, which means in the city. Our process basically takes less gas volume and produces more of an output than any other treatment solution. less nitrogen dioxide into the system. Just in our chamber alone, in our combustion chamber alone, we have less nitrogen dioxide before it goes through our flue gas treatment and then is released out as flue gas, which is well below regulatory limits. Having a facility here in Hamilton will allow for quote unquote a one-stop shop. No city trucks will need to go further to congest various areas and or drive out to the landfill. We won't need any waste transfer stations to take the 12-ton packer trucks to then transfer the municipal solid waste into walk-in floors and then further drive them into the city. Everything will be done in-house. We're also going to pre-sort some of the garbage because about 30 to 40% of the garbage still contains good recyclable material that unfortunately doesn't get put into the blue box. And so you can see our process over here. We're going to be taking out, before the combustion itself, paper, plastic, metal, and food as well for a composting component of it. The rest of it will be not incinerated, but we call it a controlled burn. It's almost like baking it, trying to squeeze out as much energy as we possibly can. The ash that's going to be left over will be segregated and sent out to cement companies that can use that as an alternative or a mixture for sand. The heat will obviously then heat up some water that we have in there. And the high-pressured steam will turn a turbine, producing electricity that we can pump back into the system. That's basically the gist of it. We have the capacity to do 240,000 tons. We're not asking for any finances from the city. We have it fully funded. It's about a $150 million project. Will take us about 3 to 4 years to build. We're just asking just to be heard from the city. We have solutions that worked in Europe quite consistently over, like I said, 500 facilities. We can handle 240,000 tons, reduce about 70,000 tons of carbon emissions into the city of Hamilton. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Appreciate you guys taking the time.
You timed that perfectly.
Yeah, was it 5 minutes on the dot?
It was 5 minutes on the dot.
I was told I had 5 minutes. I said, okay, I'll squeeze out as much as I can.
That's perfect. Thank you for your delegation. Is there any questions of the delegate here today? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I'm not sure, through you, Chair, just wanted to pass on the local context. There's just been a very large push out here in our area regarding waste to energy when it comes to incineration of waste. Huge concerns from the community, especially given that environmental standards right now when it comes to air quality aren't what they need to be in Ontario. Is there a concern, or how will, in these proposals, how will residents be kept safe? Talked a lot about European models, like they have different standards that we don't have here. Is the legislative environment strict enough to make this safe, in your opinion? And how, maybe in terms of, is the plan to meet standards, exceed standards? Hundreds of community members were just at a town hall speaking out against this concern, largely because of air quality concerns out in Greensville. So I just wanted to pass on that local context that I think the folks in Hamilton, myself included, are not necessarily sure that this is part of our energy solution. And I think part of that's not necessarily just because of the technological solutions, but also the regulatory environment. Are you just able to talk about the regulatory environment a little bit and how that intersects with what you're proposing?
Yes, definitely. So within the 5 minutes that I had, we have data that puts us well below regulatory emission limits, well below. I'm talking in the double digits. And so coming off of the European model, the only reason their emissions are regulated is because they're not producing as much garbage. So they actually import garbage from outside, from other countries, which is why it's hard for them to keep track. For us over here, we plan not just to come into Hamilton and start quote unquote burning garbage. We have air quality issue here in Hamilton, we're aware of that. We have RTO devices, they're called regenerative thermal oxidizers. We do plan on working with the existing industrial and commercial companies here in Hamilton. We already work with a few private recyclers. We're planning on increasing that amount. And first and foremost, our technology, before we put it into a waste to energy, we have components that we can sort of add on to the existing companies here, you know, for example, some of the metal smelters and some of the coal smelters here, to reduce their air quality first. So that it sort of quote unquote makes room for us to come in, even though we're still going to be below regulatory emissions. So we're not too concerned when it comes to adding anything to Hamilton. We're in fact going to reduce it significantly and then come in with a further solution.
That was my only question / kind of just wanted to pass on that heads up that this isn't the first proposal, and obviously this is a different proposal, but just wanted to pass that on. So thanks, and that's all through the chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I see that we have more questions for the delegate.
Councillor Wilson just said that basically you're doing incineration. Is that true? Or is there a difference between incineration and pyrolysis?
So incineration, I mean, there's not really a difference. It's more of how controlled you are. I mean, you can think of it as a regular combustion engine for a car. You have quote unquote eco modes for a car and more efficient vehicles that are coming out that burn less fuel than cars 20 years ago. And so the technology that we have is just more efficient. We're not just throwing it into a pit of fire. It's a controlled bake, I guess you can say. And also, we know that 30 to 40% of garbage in Ontario still contains recyclables. I mean, whether we like it or not, people are still throwing away their plastic bottles and bags and whatnot. If they don't want to walk 10 feet and throw it in the recycling bin, it's going into the garbage. So we will have a pre-sort. And so that pre-sort will allow us to control not just burning plastic. We're just going to be burning actual solid municipal waste. We're not going to be burning the food. We're actually going to have a different process for that to be able to, it's like an anaerobic digestion where we take out the actual gases from the food itself, but the plastic, the metal, the wood, the bulky items will be taken out prior to and sent to regular recycling facilities so that they can put it back into the market. We will not be burning those or baking them.
And then just another simple question from a simple guy. Waste to energy. So what kind of energy are you producing? Gas? Or is it gas to burn and turn turbines, or is it just gas and you're selling the gas?
So we have both options. We can either work on the anaerobic digestion side. We can work with companies such as Enbridge, for example, to pump natural gas back into the city. But primarily, we're going to be starting off with electricity. So our steam that's going to be pumping the turbine will be able to generate around 25 megawatt hours of energy that we can pump directly back into the city.
Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you.
All right, seeing Kevin Hunt.
All right, a couple of questions.
Yes.
Have you any demonstration plants in Ontario?
Not in Ontario. We're the Techum, the company that we're working with right now, is primarily based out of. Is not primarily. They're just based out of Europe, and so we want to bring their technology over here with the standards and operating procedures that they have, and sort of introduce it to this market over here.
Okay. Second question. So you're talking about making steam. Is there another waste heat stream?
Say again?
Is there a second waste heat stream, a low waste heat stream in your system?
So in terms of output, yeah, so we have just the ash. There's not going to be a waste steam. We're going to try to utilize as much of the waste as we possibly can in terms of steam. But once we reach a certain pressure, that steam will be exited out through flue gas. So it would...
Well, it was more about, is there a secondary waste heat? Like, there's a primary high temperature waste heat. Is there a secondary lower waste heat?
Just for pressure control. That's all it is, just for pressure control. But that steam that's going to be at the very end is going to go through the flue gas treatment. So like I said, just the combustion chamber alone has lower emissions before it's even put through the bag house or the flue gas treatment plant before it releases out just as steam. And we do have options. I mean, because we're going to be central and we're looking at being in central Hamilton, we necessarily don't have to push the steam out. There's local companies that purchase steam, that need steam, local paper mills or any sort of high temperature operating facilities that can use steam. You can have pipelines directly built to their facility or some sort of arrangement, whether it's compressed steam, something along those lines. So we'll try not to waste as much as we can down to the bottom ash and the fly ash, which is pretty much 10% of the total amount of the 240,000 tons that we can do every year. About 24,000 tons in bottom ash will be sent directly to cement companies as well. So we're trying not to have any waste left over, which we most likely won't.
Great. Councillor Tannison, you've got another question.
Just a follow-up question.
Yes.
Is there any odor associated with this process of nothing? So you said steam's gonna get blown off?
The smokestack is just steam, and I just had 5 minutes, but I would love to give you guys a more detailed presentation. We have actual numbers and data and stuff like that, and so it's just steam coming out of the smokestack. There's no odor, there's no smell. Everything's going to be controlled inside the flue gas treatment and the bag house. If there is a smell, like I said, it's just a matter of tweaking it to meet regulatory standards. But as I mentioned before, we are well below. It's going to seem odd at first. There's going to be a lot of steam, but it's just steam.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for delegation today.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
So item 6.2, we have various delegation requests respecting item 7.8, Solid Waste Management Master Plan. Scott Gate, Jeff Black, and Brett Hooton, please address the committee. I'm going to need, however, a mover and seconder to extend this delegation as they're requesting to put all three into one 15-minute presentation here, if that's okay with committee. I need a mover for that. I'm seeing Alex Wilson and seconded by Councillor Taddison. Any opposed? None, that carries.
Chair Francis, I'm not sure, is my microphone already on?
There you go. Yeah.
I've got somebody that understands technology better than I do. Chair Francis and members of the Waste Management Subcommittee, my name is Jeff Black. I'm with CRS, which is a division of Lake Erie Green Power. We're here to do a presentation with regard to solid municipal waste.
Thank you, Chair Francis and members of the Waste Management Subcommittee. My name is Brett Hooton. I'm Senior Director of Power and Transmission for Tallgrass Energy, which is owner of the Lake Erie Green Power Project. With us online today is Scott Gate, the CEO of CRS. He will be running through the slides for us today, and then of course we will all be here to answer any questions you may have. So I believe he is online and ready to move forward.
Good morning. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. Excellent, wonderful. Chair Francis and members of the Waste Management Subcommittee, again, thank you very, very much for this opportunity to present. My name is Scott Gate, as was recently just mentioned, Chief Executive Officer for Collective Resource Services. So I appreciate the opportunity here. Let me share my slides real quick. Are you all able to see that? I see head nodding. Excellent. All right. First, want to commend Encore for hitting his time. Hopefully, I'll hit my time as well. So he set a very good example from that standpoint. So thank you. So I want to take this time to talk about Lake Erie Green Power and the green carbon negative waste solution that we provide. So first off, I really want to emphasize and talk about the problems. Now, I'm sure in a lot of different meetings, committee meetings, as well as talking with the local communities, the residents within Hamilton, you've heard some positives and you've heard negatives, whether it deals with recycling, whether it deals with conservation, whether it deals with the landfills, whether it deals with waste collection. There's 2 points that I really want to be able to drive home right now, and as was previously mentioned, and that is permitted landfill capacity is rapidly shrinking. And with that shrinking landfills, that's a concern that you have to not only look at today, but start thinking about how do we look forward to the future and how can we help mitigate any challenges that come from that. Another thing to think about when it comes to landfills, and that is the greenhouse gases that are generated by those landfills last as long as there's waste available within the landfill to decompose. And that timeline can stretch for generations. A lot of people have this mindset that once trash goes to a landfill, it's out of sight, it's out of mind. But what they don't realize, especially when you think about the climate change and the impact of these greenhouse gases, is that landfill will continue to generate methane and CO2 long after the trash has been deposited there. Another thing to think about with shrinking landfills, existing and new landfills, if that's a path that you choose to look at, require extensive permitting. And there's also the daily operational cost aspect to operate and maintain existing landfills, as well as landfills that are closed. Even though they're closed, and even though there's no longer trash going into them, there's still cost associated with them, and they're still generating greenhouse gases, methane, and CO2. This problem is only going to get exacerbated. If you think about the area that you live in, Hamilton, I've got ties there. My dad is actually born and raised in Hamilton. A lot of folks are going to start moving there. Ontario is looking at a huge growth rate over the next 8 years. Hamilton as well is going to benefit from that too. Roughly 236,000 new residents over the next 20 to 25, maybe perhaps 30 years. With those new residents and with that growth comes construction, demolition. Individuals are going to look to remodel their homes. When that occurs, there's additional waste that's going to end up going to the landfill. So now you've got not only today's waste, you've got tomorrow's waste and the expansion of the growing resident population, but you also have shrinking landfills. So you need to find a solution on how to deal with that particular challenge. So what is Lake Erie Green Power? So I really drove home the two main points about shrinking landfill and the greenhouse gases. Lake Erie Green Power can provide an effective, sustainable, long-term carbon negative solution. Two key points that I really want to drive home here is that we will end all new trash going to landfills, which will then eliminate that trash from becoming a greenhouse gas generator. And it's our speed to solution. We can start accepting trash within 9 to 12 months and immediately remove that particular challenge that Hamilton currently faces or will soon face with where to put their trash. So let me talk about some things that really differentiate us, make Lake Erie Green Power that environmentally sound, carbon negative, simple solution. We're different because we can utilize the existing sites, the existing transfer station, the existing trash collection methods, the existing infrastructure. We can utilize all that. We want to work with the city planners, engineers, and understand those traffic studies so that we can ideally establish a current process flow of how we want to move that trash from the existing residents or from the commercial or from industry to the transfer stations, where then it is our problem. We don't look at the problem, we look at it as we provided that solution. We can then take it from that standpoint. We look to invest equipment, as seen on these pictures, as well as training on site. We're different and also in how we process the waste. So we will take that waste stream, we'll strip out all the metals beforehand, and then we take what's remaining and we shred, compact, and bale it. And we create these inert bales that are now termed advanced thermal fuel. So these advanced thermal fuel cells are clean and tight, as you can see in the lower picture there, wrapped in green on the forklift. And that allows Lake Erie Green Power then to transport either via rail, via barge, or via truck to a final destination that's outside of Hamilton, outside of Ontario, and outside of Canada. So when you think about the cross-border challenges that, as was previously mentioned, I believe 27% of the waste actually goes to the States. We're not moving municipal solid waste. We're actually moving now contained packets, fuel cells that are considered refuge-derived fuel. It's considered a commodity. So we've addressed those cross-border concerns. Another thing to think about, once we get to the destination, the location where we take these fuel cells, they are then utilized in our advanced thermal decomposition facility, where there we're going to generate green products, such as e-fuels, sustainable aviation fuel. We'll also use the fly ash and the bottom ash for building materials, for concrete, as well as generating green energy. So those are really some key points on what differentiates us. I want to talk about the top 10 reasons why the Lake Erie Green Power is your municipal solid waste solution. And first off, it comes to that foundational aspect of who we are. We consist of Tallgrass, which is an energy solution leader. They also have the largest CO2 sequestration project in North America. Then, the company that I'm with, Collective Resource Services, we have members that bring over 50 years of clean, environmentally conscious waste solutions that have been built in North America. Another thing to think about, as we look at our particular process, we redirect municipal solid waste that was destined for landfill. We turn it into fuel cells, eliminating any new trash going to the landfill and the potential of that trash generating greenhouse gases. Lake Erie Green Power is a CO2 solution provider, and as previously mentioned, we also have CO2 solutions in capturing. We have the largest CO2 sequestration site in North America. There's also this belief, and we've heard it in many different communities that we've talked to, that once you launch or once you start a municipal solid waste, or I'm sorry, an EFW project or waste to energy, that recycling rates will then go down. And our data simply doesn't show that. In fact, what we have seen is once an energy from waste or municipal solid waste program is set up, we've actually seen recycling rates increase. So it really has taken what existed from a current recycling rate and improved upon it and made it so that we see that improvement, whether it's through metals or plastics, because we can pull all of that out of there. Another thing that we want to really emphasize is that we turn our waste or bales into refuse-derived fuel. They're sealed inert bales, so that addresses any cross-border challenges. It also means that we're not looking to build any facility in Hamilton or in Ontario. We're looking to take the trash, we're going to put it into clean bales, as you see in the lower picture, and then transport those to our facility so that we can then process it. We take municipal solid waste, we turn it into green fuels, as I mentioned earlier. So we're not only looking to eliminate trash going to your existing landfills that are rapidly shrinking, but we also offer a solution to remediate existing landfills. So if you look at the current landfills, I believe there's two, one that's currently operational, one that's closed. We can then go in and extend the life of the existing one by removing some of the trash that's already there. We can also go into the one that's closed, clean all that trash out of there so that you can turn that land into something more useful. So we bring a lot of different potential solutions, and it's something else that I really want to emphasize as well, that I'm not coming with a big ask at the end of this presentation. We are not asking for municipal capital requirements. Our project is fully funded. We, in fact, look to invest equipment at the local transfer stations, invest training with the local individuals who are currently working there, to really provide that long-term solution of not only removing trash from going to the landfills, but also training the existing individuals who are working. Another thing that I want to emphasize, and this goes toward and kind of supports what we talked about a little bit earlier with the recycling and the environmental aspect, is LEGP's environmental and sustainable governance focus. So as I mentioned before, members of Lake Erie Green Power have built numerous waste energy plants in the US in states such as Florida, Minnesota, and California. Now, emissions obviously are a concern, but 4 waste energy power plants have been built in the highly regulated Los Angeles County area. Now, what's so important about Los Angeles County? It is a member of the South Coast Air Quality Management District. That is one of the strictest non-attainment districts in the United States. The plants that were built there not only met, but they exceeded the emission standards within those particular areas. So by meeting that, they've not only met and exceeded California's, US EPA, European Health Union, they've also exceeded WHO and Ontario Ministry of Environment. The California South Coast Air Quality Management District is the strictest in the US, and it covers Los Angeles County, Orange County, San Bernardino, and Riverside. So there's really the key points to drive home in this presentation are, we understand landfills are shrinking. We understand that landfills continue to generate greenhouse gases. We offer a solution that is not looking to build a facility in your district or in your neighbor's district. It's not in my backyard, so to speak. We take trash, we put it into fuel cells that are easily shippable and can be moved across the border. And then we will turn that trash and create green energy, sustainable aviation fuel, for example. The fly ash, bottom ash will then go to concrete or building material. Nothing that is sent to us will go to a landfill. So with that, Chair Francis and members of the Waste Management Subcommittee, I want to thank you for this opportunity to present, and I will pause and open it up for any questions.
Great. Thank you so much for your delegation today. Do we have any questions of today's presenter or delegates, rather? Councillor Tattison, go ahead, please.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Through the chair, just a question about the bales. Once they're transported to your location, what's the process that you break down those bales? Like what happens with the bales? How do you convert it to, I guess, airplane fuel, these green fuels that you're talking about?
Through the chair, if I can respond to that. So the bales, when they arrive at the final destination, and we can wrap them numerous times so they can either sit, and the EPA has stated that they are considered environmentally safe, 7 to 10 years. We plan to utilize them right away. We will take those bales, they will go directly into a pit that is part of our waste energy facility. At that point, they're broken up by automated cranes, and then they move through the process. The green fuels that are then generated, that comes because we capture the CO2. We're a leader in CO2 solutions. We will capture the CO2, and through a process, we can turn that into methane or methanol, and then turn that into sustainable aviation fuel or other types of e-fuels.
So we're getting a little technical on me now. So you're capturing the CO2, and then there's a process that you turn it into a different type of gas. What's that process look like from the CO2?
That's a rather complex, or forgive me, through the chair, that is a rather complex process that we can go through. And Brett, there's probably, if you wouldn't mind, might be able to handle that question a little bit better.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So the way we take the CO2 to turn it into a fuel is we will have a separate project that is adjacent or within close proximity to this that will create green hydrogen. So once we have the green hydrogen, we then have the two components that we would need to make a variety of fuels. E-diesel, sustainable natural gas. What we're really focused on right now is sustainable aviation fuel. Tallgrass to date has an existing agreement with United Airlines regarding sustainable aviation fuel. Now it is separate from this and using a different process, but we do have history and background on working on sustainable aviation fuel. So we'd like to do something similar here, where not only are we limited to turning the waste into electricity, which we will do, we will also use it to make a fuel as well. And there's the ability to pivot between, say, SAF and e-diesel, depending on the desires of the market. Our goal would be to bring that back into the province if there are customers here that would be interested in that product, but that's not something that would make or break the project.
So at this point in time, is our industries ready for green hydrogen? Like who's using hydrogen now out there?
Yeah, I think our use for green hydrogen will be to make the SAF, and there have been quite a bit of announcements recently regarding SAF. I personally, this is Brett speaking, probably not wanting to speak for others. I'm not a big proponent of using green hydrogen to make electricity. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. What does make sense to me, though, is using that to help decarbonize industries that can't use electricity. It's going to be hard to get a giant battery on an airplane, as an example. I know Air Canada announced they have a $50 million fund to look at sustainable aviation fuel. The volumes we're talking about from this, if we fill up the entire plant, we could make 4,500 barrels a day, as an example, of jet fuel. So it's a significant amount, but not a large enough amount that there's a concern about the industry trying to absorb that much volume. It's a very small percentage of, as an example, what Air Canada uses. So I do think there's a market for these things. We've seen it with existing announcements from both United, Air Canada, and others about their interest in SAF. There are other applications for green hydrogen. We'd be happy to talk about that sometime if you're interested or if you have other questions on it. But for us, what we plan to do is use it to make either, again, e-diesel or SAF.
Through the chair, no more questions. Thanks, guys.
Any further questions here? Seeing none, oh, Kevin, go ahead, please.
Through the chair, moving all that waste, have you factored that cost in? So there's a carbon cost, but there's also a transportation cost.
There is. So through the chair, if I may, the cost both on the carbon side and on the monetary side, we have taken into account. Because these bales are wrapped so tightly, they're very compact, they're fairly easy to transport, again, through either barge, rail, or truck. When it comes to the emissions of those, certainly some transport options are better than others. Barge is particularly attractive in that case. As a part of the life cycle analysis, when we talk about this being a carbon negative solution, we factored in any emissions related to the actual transport of the fuel cells. On the cost side of things, by moving these in large quantities with either rail or barge, you can move so much at once that it becomes fairly cost effective to move the product. There's another advantage by, we are looking at doing this down in the United States, so we transport it across the border. There's significant tax incentives that help on the economics of this as well. So all that factored together, we think makes this, in addition to making a product at the end that can be marketed, an economic process. It's something that is life cycle carbon negative.
That's great. Councillor Wilson, can I get you to take the chair for just a moment, please? Through you, Chair, I just want to clarify one of the points that you had made there in the presentation. You said there's zero capital cost. Could you explain to me the financial expectation for the city of Hamilton under this scenario, please?
Yeah, through the chair. But yeah, that's right. So through the chair, yes. So our ask when we go to the council is for zero capital requirement. This project is fully funded. Now, obviously, we want to step back and look at where we can invest equipment and invest training. But we're not coming to this council requesting any capital requirements.
And through the chair, if I may just add on to what Scott was saying. So Tallgrass is prepared to invest all the capital needed for the project. There will, of course, be similar to if we were building a landfill, which we want to do, there would be something similar to a tipping fee that would be associated with that. So there would be a per ton fee for the collection of the waste. So instead of paying to send it to a landfill, no capital outlay, but there would be a charge associated with that. Just want to make sure that was clear.
Thank you for both of you clarifying this for me through you, Chair. So let me get this straight. There's zero capital cost, which is good, but I'm hearing something quite different in that you want Hamilton taxpayers to pay a fee to remove this trash, and based on how much trash Hamilton has in a year, do you have an idea of how much money that would cost Hamilton taxpayers in one fiscal year? Yeah. Through you, Chair.
Yeah. So through the chair, if I may. Yes, there would be something similar to a fee as if you send it to a landfill. That would be the case. What we would like to do is to work with the city and with staff to come back to you with a more solid answer on the number. It's going to depend on a few things. The frequency, the specific volumes that you have, how we can transport it out of your existing transfer stations, and we would like to work with the staff to put that analysis together to come back to you with a real number. I wouldn't want to give you something and then have to come back and correct it later. So that's certainly an answer we would like to come back to you and provide you with.
I appreciate that, and maybe I could dig a little bit deeper on that just to understand a little bit better. Are we talking maybe millions of dollars? Or are we talking maybe thousands of dollars? What are we talking here?
Scott, do you want me to answer that, or would you like to? Either way.
Well, again, through the chair, it goes back to looking at, similar to what Brett had mentioned, the processing fees. We also want to sit down with council and understand, and with staff, and understand other costs associated with maintaining landfills, with paying employees, with moving trucks, and all that operational cost to understand what Hamilton is currently paying today, and then look at how we can come up with a solution that either meets that or comes in a little bit less. It really, again, I don't want to put out a figure that could be thousands, millions, or less, and then have to correct that. So I think one of the asks is that we have the opportunity to engage and collaborate with staff as well as with the Waste Management Subcommittee, and really look at sharing information, sharing the different opportunities so that we can bring our comprehensive solution and whatever that potential associated cost is back to the council for further conversations.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. It's my understanding that as of today, we don't pay a tipping fee. This is our landfill. So this would be a significant request to municipal taxpayers at a time where there are a lot of significant requests. So,
To the chair, if I may, just a quick response to that. I think what we would like to compare the cost to would be the cost of the ongoing expense of owning and operating your landfill, and then compare it to that. One of the solutions that Scott went through earlier was that we can remediate existing landfills. So one of the potential costs that we could offset is your ongoing expense of your existing landfills. And so that's something we would like to get in, look at that, see if we can come in at a level that is consistent with not necessarily a tipping fee. I understand it's a different price structure than what you pay today since you did invest the capital in that landfill, but your ongoing expense of transporting it to the landfill, the operation of the landfill itself, if we could come in at a rate that, a different rate structure, but in a way that is comparable to your existing fee structure there. In my opinion, also a solution that's significantly greener than what's there today.
I really appreciate that clear explanation for us there. Thank you for that. So with that, I'll take the chair back. Councillor Wilson, if there are any other questions of the delegate? Councillor Tassel, go ahead, please.
Just a question. You said that you're going to be using the transfer station to shred and compact. Is there any concerns that we should have around that process? Are there noise concerns? Are there pollution concerns at that level?
So through the chair, appreciate, and that's a wonderful question. If you look at the equipment that's utilized for the shredding, the compacting, the baling, it's all electrical. And if you think about the noise, the decibel levels of moving the trucks through a particular location, that equipment operates much lower at a decibel level than your typical trash truck that would be bringing the trash into the existing transfer stations. So we don't see any concerns with noise concerns, and again, no pollutions because they're all electrical machines.
Thanks. And just jumping back to, I think to Kevin's question earlier about the, I guess, talking about transporting and greenhouse gases and transportation. Has there been any thought given to your marine, your barge, rail or truck transportation and utilizing green hydrogen to power those transit or transportation mechanisms?
Through the chair, yes. We have looked at the different options of how best to transport it. Again, as we think about the environmental aspect and the carbon negative solution that we provide, we're looking at every single component of that overall process. Barge, as Brett had mentioned earlier, is one of the least environmental polluting because of the volume that we can move. Now, some of the aspects that we've looked at, whether they can be electric vehicles, whether they can run on hydrogen, we absolutely have looked at that, and we looked at utilizing the best available technology that can effectively move the product.
We'll go into details at a later point, but thanks for that question and that you have considered it is, it weighs in your favor in my mind. Thank you.
Great. Next up, we have Councillor Wilson for a second, or actually first time. Thank you.
Yeah, just one question for me. What does net zero or carbon negative mean in this context? Because again, like it's just what you're measuring against. And so just wondering what your baselines are. So is it carbon negative relative to an alternative solution? Is it carbon negative relative to the life cycle carbon emissions of the project? Is it carbon negative relative to when you accept the material? Just wondering when that metric is happening, or if you could kind of walk me through the carbon negative math, if that's okay.
Sure, through the chair, sure can. Great question, Alex. When you look at the overall life cycle of what a landfill will generate from methane and CO2, when you look at the process of the trucks going back and forth from either the residential, commercial, industrial to get that trash, pick it up, take it to the transfer station, then that trash getting combined and moving to a landfill, that all creates a certain amount of CO2. What we've done is we've analyzed that at a very high level, and then we look at how much CO2 will we generate, whether it's through the movement of the trash, whether it's through the barging, the rail, and then how much of the CO2 we will actually capture. We have a power plant in Florida that doesn't capture CO2, but through their analysis, and they've had third-party analysis as well, they are carbon negative. So when we look at our process and that we will actually be capturing the CO2 that comes out of the power generation facility, we know for sure that we are going to be carbon negative.
So, and again, just based on what definition? Because earlier I heard it's in comparison to landfill waste, and I'm just trying to understand what the definition is. It's not a point I'm trying to make here at all. Just trying to really understand what the words you're using mean in this context. And so the plant that's doing carbon capture, again, is that relative to the baseline of what a landfill would do, or is that there's a negative emissions happening? Is it lower, or is it negative to a 0 point? I guess that's my question. Then what's happening with the captured CO2? Is it being sold? Is it being locked in for 100 years? There's so many variables that go into a carbon negative equation. Just wondering what are some of those assumptions that you've made, so we know what that looks like.
Through the chair. So, and again, great question, great clarifying question. So we look at what is going on today. How much CO2 is being generated from the landfill? How much CO2 is being generated from the overall process of picking up the trash, transporting it to the transfer station, then taking it to the landfill? So we look at that particular figure and how much CO2 is generated, and also how much CO2 a landfill will continue to generate for decades, for generations. Again, like I mentioned earlier, out of sight, out of mind, but it continues to generate that greenhouse gas. So we have that figure. Then we also look at what is the CO2 that's generated from our process. Now, without the CO2 capture, the CO2 that would be generated from our process is less than what that current figure is of the process going on today. The CO2 that we capture solidifies that we are carbon negative. Now, as mentioned earlier, we then take that CO2 and we will turn that CO2 through the process that Brett described earlier into different e-fuels that can then be utilized by other industry, such as sustainable aviation fuel, et cetera.
Thank you. I think that does help. So the answer is, it is in bar graph A, we have what our landfill would be. Then in a lower bar is the amount of carbon from your process. And then there's capture that's happening further. So there's your system that is just, you have a lower amount of carbon than a traditional landfill is the claim. And then carbon capture is taking that bar and moving it below the 0 point into the negative point is the second kind of piece there. Thanks. I just wanted to understand what that is. I mean, I think it really does matter where those things go and where the carbon goes. My understanding is currently the biggest market for captured carbon is enhanced oil recovery. So again, not necessarily, it's carbon negative at a point in time. And I think that's my point, is depending on where you draw that window, before or after something determines what you capture in your analysis. And so just really appreciate the added detail. And if there's anything else to add kind of about what those assumptions are, again, not trying to say it is or it isn't carbon negative. I'm just trying to understand, we have these branding words and then we have what's actually happening. I'm much more interested in what's actually happening.
Yeah. Through the chair, if I may add on to that and to address one of the concerns about enhanced oil recovery. We are also doing carbon sequestration elsewhere. It's not associated with this project. That would be an option if that was the desire. We think turning it into a fuel that's needed to help decarbonize other industries is valuable, but again, we're doing sequestration elsewhere. All of the sequestration that we are doing is exclusive from enhanced oil recovery. We are not allowing any of the CO2 that we are sequestering to be used for that. The project that Scott referenced earlier is actually a large pipeline that we converted from natural gas service. We put it into CO2 service, and we're taking CO2 from ethanol plants, and we are sequestering that. So it is an option for things, but we certainly don't want to use it for EOR.
Thank you. I feel like I much better understand, again, just I was curious in what those numbers are, not a judgment piece here, just trying to understand what's in the proposal and what the model is. So thank you. My questions are answered.
Great. Seeing no further questions of the delegates, so I want to thank you for your delegation today. I appreciate it. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the delegations? Councillor Tadison, Kevin Hunt. Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Moving on to staff presentations. In the interest of time, we're going to hear all these staff presentations, 7.1 to 7.9, and then receive them together at the end. 7.1, citywide litter review. I'd like to call upon Angela Story, Manager of Waste Collections, to begin the presentation.
Thanks. Good morning, Chair Francis. Angela Story, Director of the Waste Management Division, and I'm filling in today for Joel McCormick as he's away on conference. So we wanted to just provide the members of the subcommittee with an update on our citywide litter review. Some or all of you would have been interviewed, as you'll recall, as part of this process. So the review came about with a motion that came from the Public Works Committee back in May. We are to conduct a service level review across all divisions, so not just specific to waste, for proactive and reactive litter collection in the public realm, and report back on any operational and budgetary changes to address those service levels. Subsequently, there was a downtown report that came through from the PE, Planning and Economic Development Department, and staff were asked to identify opportunities to enhance service levels within the downtown core for critical street level issues such as waste collection, street sweeping, et cetera. So both of those motion and report recommendations we took back and determined how to best process those requests. And what we did was we're working on a citywide litter review, and it includes some public engagement, some municipal scans, trying to figure out what other big cities do in their downtowns and with respect to litter. Just this week at GIC, the 2022 to 2026 term of council priorities were also approved and approved at council. And there was a new council priority that was added in outcome number 3, which is to provide vibrant parks, recreation, and public space. A measure of success in that priority is to increase the cleanliness of public spaces through the expansion of the public works standards related to garbage and litter collection. So we have grouped this term of council priority with the 2 motions that we received at the spring and June meetings. And so just on the next slide related to, is it popping over? No worries. Okay, thank you. So just on this slide, which really is just identifying what the deliverables of the project are, is we are completing the review and identifying the current state of citywide litter management. And again, I mentioned that while waste management is a key stakeholder, we are also working with the Parks Group, the Roads Group, transit shelters, cemeteries, Hamilton Water around storm ponds, anywhere where litter is found. So the engagement exercise includes the public engagement. There was a survey that was open, which we had greater than 1,000 responses to across the city. We did some council engagement. I mentioned the interviews that you would have participated in. And we did business improvement area engagement as well. And that was really to focus on the downtown piece. So we have many downtowns in the city of Hamilton. So we wanted to ensure that we encapsulated all of the different downtown areas in those BIAs. Public Works is to identify expansion and service services related to the citywide litter management, and we're going to develop some key performance indicators so that we can hold ourselves to a great standard when it comes to cleanliness and litter. The ask of us is to report back to Public Works Committee, which we'll be doing in November, and we'll be bringing any operational and budgetary changes that may be required to expand the services, and then the recommendations will go, any recommendations that are approved would be put forward to the 2024 operating budget process. So again, we have a report coming in Q4, and then anything that was approved from that report based on the citywide litter review will end up in the budget process for next year. So that's the update.
Thank you very much. And so I apologize, it's Director Story. I crossed out the name and put your name in. My apologies for that. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none. Thank you very much for that presentation. We'll move on to 7.2. I'd like to call upon Rob Conley, Manager of Recycling and Waste Disposal, to continue the presentation.
Good morning. So currently the city is working with producer responsibilities, which are commonly known as PROs, for the hazardous and special waste, which is the HSP. I just put in these abbreviations just so if I do refer to them, that people know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is for the disposal of our hazardous waste products, and these depots that we operate are currently at our 3 community recycling centers. So a tender for operations for the 3 depots recently closed a couple of weeks ago with the city. So right now our staff is working with procurement staff, and we're just going through the bids right now and looking at those and to ensure everything's okay, and before we award or anything like that going forward. So we're analyzing those right now with procurement staff and hopefully have that analyzation done shortly. And also on top of that, we are still working with the reimbursement program. So we feel that the city is not getting a fair shake when it comes to the amount of funding we're getting for those programs. So we are working with the pros to finalize a compensation model that is fair to the city. So these options in the contract will be coming to the Public Works Committee shortly.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none. All right, moving on to 7.3, closed landfill monitoring. Once again, Rob Conley, Manager of Recycling and Waste Disposal. Please continue the presentation.
Yeah, so we wanted to give a bit of an update. It's been a while since we talked about closed landfills. Typically when we talk about landfills in this committee and in council, we're talking about the Glanbrook landfill site. However, there is the component of the closed landfill sites that the city does look after. So currently there's 13 closed landfill sites that the city of Hamilton is overseeing. These sites require monitoring through the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Now, there is a number of them that we do through environmental compliance approval. They still have those, even though they're closed, they still have ECAs in place. So there's stipulations under those ECAs that we have to collect sampling data, report it to the ministry on an annual basis. There's about 5 of those sites, and then the rest of them we're doing are more of a due diligence through council or through consultant recommendations. So some of the activities would be groundwater, surface water, landfill gas sampling, and also inspections to ensure that there's integrity of the the capped areas, making sure that everything is environmentally sound. We also have leachate collection systems at some of those sites as well. So those have to be maintained, flushed, and we work in conjunction with the water department to ensure that they're operationally collecting things efficiently, and those collected leachates do go to the Woodward treatment for treatment, as the Glanbrook landfill does as well. I think we can go to the next slide, I believe, please. So yeah, I mentioned 5 of these sites have active leachate collection systems. So one of the closed sites does have a passive landfill gas collection system. So what a passive system is basically it vents to the atmosphere. There's not enough landfill gas at that site or waste in the ground because there is regulations in Ontario. You have a certain amount of waste in the ground and there's gas. You have to have an active site, active collection system. It's a passive system, so basically it vents to the atmosphere, but it has to be monitored still. And several of the sites around the site, the city do have end uses in place, and a lot of them are utilized. For example, what we call the West Hamilton landfill is K-Dredge Park, and that one has sports fields on it. The former Rennie Brampton site has the walking trail that's part of the system, and then of course we built the Red Hill Valley Turtle Meeting Place. That was a project that our area built in conjunction with working with other city divisions and departments. So we do try to utilize the sites the best we can. Some of them are so small, it just doesn't make sense. They're a fenced area, they're in a rural setting. They still have to be monitored though, and through that monitoring, we do still report. Oh, and by the way, the due diligence sites that we do have, we still report that to the Ministry of Environment. It might be in a 3-year schedule where we compile data and supply that. There's no definitive date where it has to be done. We just do it on a 3-year model. The ministry still does review those reports and they do give comments. And slowly as these sites get older, they attenuate. A lot of them were, closed 40, 50 years ago. They were a small municipal site that only had municipal solid waste. They've attenuated out. We can start taking those off of our monitoring program, but we want to ensure that, of course, the environment is safe before we do that. One of the exciting projects that I worked on in my former position, but it's still under my work group, is at the Upper Ottawa site, where we establish a bobolink and eastern meadowlark designated habitat areas. So that area is on title with the Ministry of Natural Resources, and we maintain that area according to consultant reports to ensure that there is habitat for bobolink and eastern meadowlark. And so, as I stated before, we continue to work with the Ministry of Environment and Conservation and Parks to review monitoring requirements on an annual basis, and for the due diligence sites, it might be less frequent, might be every 3 years we submit those, and we base it on consultant recommendations. We can modify sampling programs as things tend to, like I say, attenuate out, or there's less threat of any particulate or whatever getting into the environment. So yeah, I believe, is that the last slide? Yes, it is. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I recognize Councillor Wilson, please. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. And through the chair, not a question so much specifically about these 13 sites, but more so the sites that aren't on this list. My understanding is across the province, there's about 2,000 small dumps that have been closed in Ontario's history. I'm just wondering, are there sites that we're aware of across the city that are not a part of this regime because they were never municipally owned, either by the city of Hamilton or a former city or community? And just wondering, how does this regime and how does what we're doing compare to what's going on in some of those other sites that exist across the city?
Through the chair, yes, we are aware of other sites that may have been operated as a dump site back, 50, 60, 70 years ago, to privately run landfills that are closed. Privately run landfills are obviously a more design component. They will either have their environmental compliance approval revoked, meaning that they don't have any requirements through the Ministry of Environment and Conservation and Parks. So whether those private companies are doing due diligence monitoring like the city of Hamilton is or not, I can't comment. I would have to look into that. The smaller dump sites, as long as they aren't permitted or have an ECA, environmental compliance approval, they will just be sitting there as any other contaminated site, an old gas station, or if there is an industrial, like a roofing, say, company in the back of the day, they'll just be sitting there, unfortunately, and usually what happens is when there's an issue, then someone will come in and start monitoring and remediating it. But that's usually under the environmental assessment type of the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. So if those lands transfer, whatever, they'll do a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 EA type work on those sites. But yeah, I can't comment, but we are aware of other sites. But if the city of Hamilton is not the ones who are take ownership of those sites or whatnot, it would be up to the owners to either do due diligence, or if their permits were revoked, they may not do any sampling.
Thank you. I think that really does help. And I'm thinking of sites specifically on the Brow in Ward 13. And just, I think, yeah, a real testament about what we've been able to do. Obviously, this isn't necessarily the solutions we'd be pursuing, hopefully, in the future. We've just been hearing, we know landfills aren't necessarily where we want to go a century ahead of now, or kind of looking ahead. We know we have to do some more innovation there. But I do experience, I hear this tension of folks kind of looking at what we've done. We've activated new trail properties, we've done some of these things. Meanwhile, we have private sites that are kind of sitting, not getting those enhancements, not necessarily having that environmental monitoring regime, understanding that's a provincial issue, just trying to better understand the liability. And so I guess what I'm working towards is, it sounds like if I have some questions about maybe the monitoring regime of a couple private sites local to the ward, it'd be better to maybe follow up offline and just get a bit of an understanding about, is there an ECA process in place? What are they sharing with the ministry, and some things like that, as well as, if we were the owner, what would we have been able to do, or what would the comparable project have looked like if this was something that was in our custody?
Through the chair, yeah, that is exactly what I would do. I mean, I'd be happy to have a one-on-one with you if you want to discuss what we do in more detail. But if they do have an environmental compliance approval in place, there will be a component of an annual report that they would have to file, which is a public document. So you can always get a copy of that sort of reporting of what their sampling protocols are, the frequency, the analysis and whatnot. That has to be reported. So you can get a copy of that.
Provided the MECP requires those documents to exist. So yeah, I think, yeah.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate that, and I'll do that follow-up offline. Those are my questions.
Perfect. Any other questions? Councillor Tannison, go ahead, please.
I just, through my notes, they may be inaccurate. Every 3 years you need to make a report. I'm talking about the passive gas release in some of our landfill sites that are closed. So how often do you have to monitor that? Is it monthly? Is it biannual?
Through the chair, if there's no environmental compliance approval, it's based on consultant's recommendations. So what we do is the consultant will compile the report every 3 years. They'll look at the data that we've compiled and submitted, and they'll base the next sampling phase on what they have found through the analysis of that data. So it's different for every site. There's not one thing that fits all. The one site that we have the passive gas, for example, we're doing that, I believe it's 8 times a year still. We do that sampling, but I'll come back with a better answer for you if you would like to look at that or talk about it. But yeah, it's that, and that's based on consultant recommendations.
And that 8 times a year, is that happening at the Ottawa site? Ottawa Street site?
Through the chair, no.
No.
So the Upper Ottawa site was depleted. They had a landfill gas collection system up into the early 1980s. It was deemed that there was not enough gas to operate a site like that. So we just monitor the gas, and that site definitely still has an environmental compliance approval. So we have to follow what's spelled out in that and report that, and that goes in an annual report as well.
Just a final question then, the one that you are monitoring 8 times a year, are there any trends showing in the measurements that you're getting?
Through the chair, it's actually, it is going down over the last 16 years that I've been involved, but there still is gases present at that site, so that's why we maintain that passive collection, and basically it's just expelled to the atmosphere.
Thanks, Rob.
Seeing no further questions, so I wanted to thank Manager Conley, and Move on to the next one, 7.4, waste diversion at special events. I'd like to call upon Ryan Kent, Manager of Waste Policy and Planning, to begin the presentation.
Good morning. So just wanted to give an update to the Committee on Waste Diversion at Special Events. So to give some context, currently we provide, for a number of years, have provided support to special events for waste diversion. Currently, the program we provide support to provides support to events that have expected attendance between 15,000 to 100,000. They're on city property and they're coordinated by nonprofit organizations. This being said, that is the criteria that we currently have in place. However, there are some events that don't meet this criteria that we do provide support to due to their historical context and us providing service in the past. The support that we do provide includes providing currently roll-off containers, so the large roll-off containers for garbage collection, recycling, or organics. So we use these because these are pretty large events, as you can imagine, and quite a bit of waste is actually collected there. We also provide carts for recycling organics, so the wheeled totes, if you will, throughout the event so that the different event organizers, the different food vendors there have something to place their material in. We provide whatever signage they require, and we allow them to dispose material at our city facilities, whether it's collected by us or collected by them. This next slide provides a little bit of context as to the performance of these events in the last number of years. So the red line indicates the number of events that we provide support to, and the blue line, the waste diversion at those specific events. So you can see, if you want to look at 2019 as somewhat of a baseline, 9 events and a waste diversion rate of about 12.5%. There's no line for 2020 because of COVID, obviously. 2021 just slowly got back into it. So we had 2 events with 9% waste diversion. 2022, we got back to 9 events with, again, around 12%. And then year to date, 8 events with 18%. I would say that number that is 18%, the one event that isn't tracked on there is a large event, and usually the waste diversion is quite low, so that number will go down. Also say that the note that I have on the bottom there, additionally 2 to 4 events per year fail to divert any waste. And so it's quite a bit of fluctuation, even though that number up there is historically around 12%. There are quite a few events that divert 0 and all waste goes to landfill, even if we provided them containers for organics and recycling. As part of the 2020 Solid Waste Management Master Plan update, staff, one of the action items was for staff to look into improving waste diversion at events based on the performance that we saw, and also to look at providing services to smaller events, so under the 15,000, so we can actually provide support to those events as well. So the work that we've done over the last couple of years included piloting different options and services to improve waste diversion at the events. The first was providing front-end containers to organizers of smaller events, so as opposed to the 40-yard roll-off containers for very large events, seeing if we could actually make it work with front-end containers, so the 3 to 4 yard, maybe 6-yard containers, quite a bit smaller. Also providing staff and equipment for waste sorting stations, so we wanted to see if we controlled some of the waste that's coming in, if we could impact the waste diversion and actually get clean material as opposed to having everything rejected, which is something that we've seen historically with quite a few of these events, as I've mentioned. And then providing training to event organizers on waste stations and just how to organize their events. For the pilot results that we saw, we did provide front-end containers. We started that this year at a couple of our events. We did see that through our staff that was on site, that they were a practical solution for actually disposing the material. We also saw that for our contractor, it also worked for them as well. Where we did have staff on site, there was appropriate waste diversion. However, we did note in the pilot that once our staff were not there, that waste diversion failed to occur. So you can see in that photo that's on the slide there on the right, Each one of those containers actually has a sign on it indicating what the material stream is supposed to be. Left to right, it's supposed to be organics, recycling fiber, recycling containers, and then garbage. As you can see from that picture, we've got a mix of cardboard, garbage, and all other streams in all four of those front-end containers. Also note that considerable amount of our equipment went missing, including 3 sorting stations that we provided to the event organizers. And basically, our pilot results showed that even though we provided tools of how to do things, we provide staff to assist with some of these of waste diverting, that event organizers still need to be held a little bit more accountable for waste diversion and for city equipment that they're provided with. So that brings us to what staff are looking at to introduce as a new program and a new service level, if you will, to these events. So to be eligible to receive support from city moving forward, we would like to expand it, expected attendance between 1,000 to 100,000 residents, so dealing with those smaller and breaking it into 2 different groups, 1,000 to 15,000 being the smaller, which we would use a combination of front-end containers and roll-off, depending on the events, and the 15 to 100,000 with roll-off containers for all material. We definitely want to push that all events will be on city property, put on by nonprofits, and events with multiple locations or what you might see as insufficient areas for containers. So a large street festival with nowhere for us to actually put containers or to collect those would not be eligible for service. And obviously we want events with food service so we can divert organics. Continuing, we would need support. The support would be subject to sufficient infrastructure at these events. So space for containers. If we need hard surface on some of these locations for the roll-off and front-end containers for our contractor to drop them off, we would require that as well. Events that are provided with diversion containers. So for example, if we provided them with some front-end containers for recyclables and organics, and if they were all garbage at the end, if they do not divert the waste or put forth sufficient effort, they will no longer be eligible for support in the future. So let's say if we started the program in 2024, an event didn't divert waste as recommended by staff, we would actually void them from getting that service moving forward and charge them the tipping fees back for what wasn't diverted. We would also no longer use historical servicing as a determining factor for continuing service in the future. Because of resourcing from our contractor, the servicing that we would provide would be on a first come, first served basis, and that city staff would not operate in sorting stations, but we would provide other support such as signage. And we wouldn't be holding the event organizers to require them to have sorting stations. We would allow them to figure out the best ways they think appropriate for diverting waste, because there are other ways such as collecting material straight from the tables and having that in a controlled environment. That leads us to our next steps. So working with our special events advisory team to implement the revised program, making sure that we are aware of these events so that we've got enough notice, update a guide for event organizers with the new program requirements, and create an agreement for event organizers to receive support. So just making sure that we put that through legal and make sure that we make sure that the agreement makes sense and is within our responsibilities. And are we just moving through all of them? Okay. So I'll move back on to business recognition and education, which is I just asked, and I thought are we holding questions at the end?
I just have a question. Yeah.
Okay.
Through the chair, can you explain the tipping fees? Like, that's a penalty, but is it enough of a penalty? Is it going to make a change in behavior?
Through the chair, I would say because the support is being provided to nonprofits, it probably would be more of an incentive. Okay. The tipping fees are all part of our user fee, so those are established. It would be the same tipping fees that a resident takes their waste to one of our facilities. It would be the same tipping fee. So To answer your question, I would say yes, because we are dealing with nonprofit organizations predominantly.
And then just any thoughts of using volunteer organizations like Eco Ninjas or something to help with the monitoring, you know, high school kids getting volunteer hours or something like that?
Through the chair, that's certainly something we're, as I said, trying to put the onus on the event organizers to go out and source the volunteers to provide whatever waste diversion they want. So that's certainly something that if they asked us to provide direction, where could they get volunteers, where could they get this support, staff could definitely, you know, point them in that direction.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Kevin Hunt, please, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair. So there's consistently some organizations that are not following the recycling rules. Is there any way of educating them ahead of time and possibly almost asking them to have recycling people in place? Because I was a chair of one of the nonprofit groups, and we always would make sure that those, like the network has to be in place before you'd start the event.
Through the chair, so providing training and support to staff, volunteer groups that would be running these the events. Yeah, so that's part of the point of providing a guide. We could certainly look into providing a video, which was part of what we were looking at doing previously. That was more geared around just using a waste orientation though, and we've gotten away from that. But we are definitely, part of our plan is to provide as much support and training to those groups prior to. I know that we do have a guide currently that we have provided in the past as well. Some event organizers have used it better than others, I would say, and that's why we're here today. Yeah.
See no further questions here, so we can move on to 7.5 and carry on, please. Thank you.
All right, so item 7.5, so once again, Ryan Kent, Manager of Waste Policy and Planning, talking about business recognition and education. So again, as part of the 2020 Solid Waste Management Master Plan, one of the action items was for staff to be to relook at our business recognition and education program. So because of the action item, staff have been working to determine a new program to increase waste diversion and knowledge of best practices at Hamilton businesses. So the most recent action that we've done under this was interviewing 10 businesses at the City of Hamilton to be interviewed. We interviewed them on recognition and education. So we want to really get an understanding of what would motivate them to participate better in our programs and to perform better, and how can we best serve them. So providing education, what resources we could provide to them. So out of those 10 businesses, the majority, so 8 of them said they were interested in a recognition program, with 7 wanting to be publicly recognized, and that included social media that the city has. Other responses that received single votes included, financial rebates and city small business grants. 7 did ask for assistance with waste audits, so for city staff to actually lead a waste audit, look at their waste and see what's actually coming out of there. 5 asked for access to educational material and training, which is something that we can certainly look at and do. And 4 asked for networking opportunities with other environmentally conscious businesses, which was interesting because that isn't something that we've looked at in the past. So certainly, coming from that, we do have some next steps. We are currently designing a program for businesses that addresses the wants that they've provided. So how do we address some of these pieces that we got from the interviews, which I believe we think is good information for us to have. We also want to make sure that we educate them on providing alternatives to single-use plastics, which is another piece that we've spoken about and part of our strategy to reduce single-use plastics within the city of Hamilton. So making sure that they have good information on what makes sense to be provided into our green bin program here if they are getting service from us. Those are the key next steps that we have for this particular program. And I will stop sharing this as well.
Councillor Tazin, please, go ahead.
Can you just give me an idea, or give me some details about the businesses? You don't have to name them, but like the size, how many employees?
Through the chair, I would say that the majority of them were small restaurants in the downtown area. Those were the ones that we did get the feedback from. So I don't know the number of employees, but you can imagine the kind of standard restaurants that you'd be seeing down here. There were a couple of just retail establishments, but most of them were restaurants.
Any further questions? Kevin Hunt, go ahead, please.
Just a comment. It's actually really nice to see that they're uptaking and actually helping to drive the program. So, okay.
Great. With that, we will move on to 7.6 and continue the presentation at that point.
Item 7.6 is a Blue Box transition update. So we just want to take this opportunity. This is pretty much a standing agenda item for this group every time we meet. So we wanted to give an update on just our most current pieces here. So two quick updates. The first is that staff did submit our Blue Box transition report to the Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority by the deadline of August 31st. That's a legislated requirement to make sure that when we do transition on April 1st, 2025, that the authority has all the information they need to provide recycling service to our eligible sources. That the next decision for the city will be on servicing what are called non-eligible sources. So what properties are deemed non-eligible for producer responsibility program. We expect that recommendation report to be going to Public Works Committee Q4 of this year. The images on the slide is just a reminder of what, when we're speaking to eligible properties, what that means. So single family households, seasonal dwellings, multi-unit residential dwellings, or buildings, apartment buildings, these types of buildings, public and private schools, retirement and long-term care homes, which are not-for-profit, and specified public spaces. So an example of a non-eligible would be, for example, the building we're in right now, which is City Hall. Municipal buildings would be considered a non-eligible property under the regulation, excuse me. So servicing of Blue Box material for those would have to be considered at that time. And I will unshared to take any questions on that item.
Any questions of this? Seeing none, thank you for that. We'll move on to 7.7 now. Promotion and education update. Take it away.
Thank you. Wanted to give an update on a number of our different programs that we're giving to residents for promotion education. The first one is on off-campus student housing education, and we provided a little bit of an update at this at our last meeting, but this is what we've done since then. So at McMaster, we've gone out, staff have gone out and gone to approximately 1,200 homes that were known to be used for student housing to receive in-person education between August 28th and August 31st. So this was staff going out. We did actually, the list that we had for 1,200 homes probably grew a little bit, just from staff being on the ground and seeing other things. But this was knocking on doors and approaching students that were in these houses. At Mohawk, about half the houses, 600 houses were known to be used for student housing, and they received in-person education on September 8th. Excuse me. The material that was provided to these households included a waste calendar, postcard, and trash tags. And the distribution of material will continue until the end of November through our waste bylaw group when responding to issues and by students contacting the city. This next slide is the postcard that was actually provided to the students that were in these homes. So it's two-sided, as you can see, provided some key information, including that they can use our how to download our waste app, or Recycle Coach waste app, to give them information on set out days and what goes where, and other key information there, including if they want to put out bulk material, how to do that for free, and different collection details. Moving along with this program, staff also attended McMaster's Club Fest on September 5th and 6th and 20th, and staff planned or have attended Mohawk's Campus Life Expo on September 20th and Home Sweet Home event on September 25th. We will be continuing doing posts on social media pages, both with the city and also with both Mohawk and McMaster, and providing, moving on to ads on transit shelters around each campus, so 9 around McMaster and 5 around Mohawk. I would say that we saw quite a bit of success at actually going there and talking to students on site. I know one of the days that we were at Club Fest, when staff went back and looked at how many downloads we had of our waste app, there was about 200 downloads on those particular days, which is usually what we get in a month, just what we've done historically. So that was great to see, and obviously there's good information on there, and educating those students is great. So our next step will be to plan for the spring move-out period. Obviously, that's a key period for waste coming from these households, and continuing to educate this group as much as possible over the coming months. The next promotion education piece to give this group an update on is our language barrier education. So our waste bylaw group came to us and said that they were looking for something that they could easily give out to residents that English is not their first language. So our outreach staff developed a postcard, which you can see on there. Again, it's a two-sided postcard with 7 different languages that they could easily hand out to a resident, and they can look at it. There's different languages, and they can go online and provide resources. It also says, gives direction on how to, if you use our website, how you can actually translate it into different languages so that they understand how to do that, which is a great tool. And we've actually used this at the Mohawk events as well, because we were asked by Mohawk, because some of their students, English is not their first language, and so we've actually used this for our off-campus education as well. Next item is our Waste Reduction Week open house. So October, which is coming up, is known as Circular Economy Month, and Waste Reduction Week is the week of October 15th to the 22nd. So to celebrate that, staff are hosting an open house at the city's central composting facility and material recycling facility on Saturday, October 21st from 9 to 12. Tours will be offered every 30 minutes. The full details and registration will be posted on the city website and advertised on different social media channels and other avenues that the city commonly uses to educate or to promote these types of events. So residents that are interested in a tour are asked to register in advance at hamilton.ca/wasteeducation. So we're pretty excited to have that event running on that day. I would also say that we just opened that registration up a few days ago and already have residents signing up, so which is good. We're seeing some good uptake from the community already. The next item is at Tim Hortons Field, our green bin or organics program that we have running there. just giving a little bit of an update on this one as well. The back of house program has been running very well. It's been implemented across all the concession stands. Currently, they have about 26 green carts that they have in the hills there. The streams have been very clean. There's been no rejection at the curb. You can see the carts that are there, they're stored in this walk-in fridge that they have there to keep everything, keep it from smelling up the rest of the field, I guess you'd say. But it's been a great program. The next step is for staff to move forward with the implementation of green bins at the front of house by Grey Cup. We are actually working on that this weekend, and we'll have a staff member collect the front of house bins on Monday, weigh them, separate out the material, take it to our central composting facility, see if there is contamination issues or not, and then we'll see how we can address that. And that is the last of that item for promotion education. So I'll stop sharing before I move on to item 7.8.
Great, thank you for that. Are there any questions about this item? Kevin, go ahead, please.
You know, on your information card, have you thought about putting basically the code so that people can scan and go directly to the website?
Through the chair, are you talking about the postcard for students? Trying to remember if we actually have that on there or not.
Didn't see it on.
Pardon?
It is there.
It is there? I thought it
On the
was.
student one. No, not on the.
Yeah, it is there, yes.
So we might want to consider doing it on the language one also. So,
That's a good point.
Yeah.
We, through the chair, we can definitely consider that and look to adding that the next time we print those.
okay. Second question through the chair is the bags for the basically mattresses. I had someone question, like, where do you get them? And it didn't seem like there was a good avenue to find the source. I don't know, maybe there is a good source, but you know, as the students move out, we have to make sure that they know how to find resources. Yeah. Any comment on that?
Through the chair. I haven't looked at the sourcing of it. I know that it's a requirement now that all mattresses and box springs have to be wrapped, as well as any other material that might have bed bugs in it. But we haven't done a scan, I don't think, to provide that information to students, as opposed to just saying they need to be wrapped.
So we do have an opportunity right now before, you know, end of school, that we might want to look into somehow providing a information pathway to find the resources. So,
Through the chair, yes, we can certainly look at that as well.
okay.
All right. Any further questions? Seeing none, I appreciate that. We can move on to 7.8 now.
Thank you. Another quick item, update on an item that we speak about at all these meetings. So Solid Waste Management Master Plan, this is an update on the next one that we're working towards. So the scope of work for the next Solid Waste Management Master Plan is being developed currently so that a request for proposal can be released by the end of the year. We're actually hoping quite a bit before the end of the year. At the same time, we're also creating an evaluation criteria for proposals to evaluate those proponents that would be applying for that request for proposal. We do plan to award that contract in January of 2024, early January, so that we can have a new solid waste management master plan in place by the end of 2024. So just a quick update that this project is moving forward pretty quickly, and we hope to have that in place by 2024. So I don't know if we have any questions on that item.
Any questions on that item? Seeing none, I want to thank, oh, sorry, Kevin, go ahead, please.
I had a question on the previous item. Since our community newspapers have kind of dried up, are we thinking of going back to using the mail for getting out information?
Through the chair. Sorry, on which item were you talking about?
The previous one, education.
Okay.
So
We use mail for, I mean, the calendar, obviously, that gets mailed out to all residents. But were you thinking about for like the postcards and those things to direct mail to residents?
it's more about special events. Like, will we have to look at possibly postcards to try and help encourage people? Like, the Grey Cup's coming up. So, use the green bins, use the blue bins, ideas like that. Just to, almost like a extra prompt to our annual information. Okay.
Sure. Through the chair to Kevin. What we do here at the city is there's a person in the communications department who leverages all advertising opportunities. So typically we don't select how we want to get information out. We would work with that group to identify all the opportunities, and maybe they've got, they bought 10 and they get one free, so we'll grab the free one, that kind of thing. So we will work with them to find the best opportunities. We did look, because this was the first year for our student postcard, we worked with any properties that had had issues in the past with student waste. We utilized that to generate the walk around and deliver those postcards. But what we're doing with that now is populating a list so that for next year, we'll be able to mail those. So to your point, with, media landscape is changing all over, and just always trying to be creative, figure out what the best way to reach our audience is, and then utilize that best way going forward. Thanks.
Does that help? Yeah, that's good. Oh, very good. Recognize Councillor Wilson, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just on the last one, because we went back there, just a quick thanks. I know I had a lot of questions about that last meeting, and so really appreciated the update. On the Solid Waste Management Master Plan, just wondering if we're trying to get out a request for projects and kind of scope it out by end of this year, what's this committee's role in scoping out that request for proposal? It says the scope of work is still kind of being developed. What does that development process look like?
Through the chair, the development of the scope currently is one that's staff-driven, but we can certainly provide an update at the next meeting, Waste Management Subcommittee meeting, to provide a little bit more of an idea of what that scope is before it goes out. I'd have to look to see when the next meeting is to figure out how that aligns, but we can certainly make sure that it comes to this group before it goes out for RFP. And then this group, the Waste Management Subcommittee, could have, if there was something that wanted to be added, I guess, we could certainly look at that. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. Never trying to wander into the operational side of things. I would just imagine, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding what this activity is. And so you can clarify, or would welcome clarification that you're just misunderstanding this, Councillor. This isn't what you think it is. But if we're putting out a request for proposals, I could imagine that there are non-operational conversations there. So for example, if we want to set an ambitious diversion target beyond what's in the current run of the plan, because we're setting a new plan, or what some of those things are, would that be at the RFP stage? Or is in getting the RFP, we're asking more general questions, and then there'll be a secondary step where we can, I guess, structure out some of the next kind of master planning process, what some of that goal or vision is. I guess it seems like we're bringing in a consultant to do the process work, and maybe we're inheriting a transition plan that I'm just not aware of, but not necessarily sure we've had a determined conversation on the future of the solid waste management master plan at this committee yet. Maybe that's my question, is what is operational and what is of the purview of us? And when does the things that are the purview of us come to this committee? Because if the request for proposals is truly purely operational, respect that entirely.
So through the chair, I would say the development of the scope is more what is within reach. So for example, to your point about waste diversion rate, the scope wouldn't say what we want our diversion rate to be. It would be, we would want to look at that as part of the development of the waste management master plan. So we want to include what we want in the RFP to say, what do we want to look at? For example, the waste diversion rate that you just mentioned. How do we maybe look at resourcing once Blue Box transition has happened, those types of things. And then what the action items would be or what the targets would be for the master plan would come out of actually developing it in 2024. So that would be more, I would see the stage where we would be asking for more input from this group as opposed to developing the scope, which would say, hey, we want, in 3 months, we want this developed, and in 4 months, we want this. And so the scope is a pretty standard piece that we would do for RFP, including for our waste collection contract or for, operating any of our facilities. So they are fairly operational as to what we want. And then this group would be more involved after the fact when we're actually developing that master plan with our targets and our actions and where we want to go. And hopefully that answers your question of what this process is. But at the next meeting, I could certainly provide a more detailed idea of what the process looks so that this group has a better understanding of their involvement in it moving forward and what we expect to happen over the next, at that point, maybe it's, 10 to 12 months, whenever that next meeting happens to be.
Thank you. Through the chair, that definitely answers my questions. Really, I'm excited for all our waste management meetings, but really excited for our next one.
Great, thank you. Seeing no further speakers to this, thank you, Manager Kent, for your presentation. So move on to 7.9, Organics Management Strategy. I'd like to call upon Glenn Watt, Senior Project Manager, Long-Term Waste Planning, to begin the presentation.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I am going to give you an update on our organics management strategy. So we'll just jump to that first slide. So a new strategy is being developed to determine the preferred processing option of green bin and yard waste material with a focus on potential renewable energy. Qualitative report has been prepared that evaluates potential options for the City of Hamilton to manage its source-separated organics and leaf and yard waste. A detailed quantitative study and technology and feasibility assessment, including costing, will be completed by the fall of 2024. So in that report, there was 19 options that were looked at. It looked at the renewable energy and other innovative technologies. The report reviews the current SSO and leaf and yard waste collection processing systems, the SSO management practices in nearby municipalities, and available technologies. The report generated 19 options, and based on such criteria as renewable energy production, GHG emission reduction, net cost, flexibility, and longevity and life cycle costs, the evaluation came down to two preferred technologies with 2 methods of managing the digestate, which were wet anaerobic digestion and plug flow anaerobic digestion. So on this slide here, I just have a very simple flow chart that will take you kind of through those 2 options in the City of Hamilton type of environment. So it starts off with food waste moving into a wet anaerobic digester. In that picture, there's actually Toronto's anaerobic digester, which is a wet facility. A wet anaerobic digestion technology processes organic waste through high moisture content using such material as food waste. Wet AD involves mixing organic waste with water and pumping it through a continuously stirred reactor. Microorganisms break down the organic matter in the absence of oxygen and produced biogas. You can use this biogas to generate renewable energy such as electricity, heat, and renewable natural gas. The digestate portion is the solid residue from the AD process. It's a nutrient-rich material that can be further processed using two recommended methods. First is compost, which we're all familiar with at the compost facility now, where the material is processed using aerobic decomposition. So with the presence of air, microorganisms break down material and produce heat, carbon, and water. The compost-rich soil amendment then can improve the quality and structure of soil and help with water retention in soil. And then pyrolysis method, which we heard about a little earlier, is a thermal treatment that processes organic waste. Pyrolysis involves heating organic waste, or baking, I like that term, baking it down into three main products, the gas, the liquid, and the solid. The gas product is used to generate renewable energy, such as electricity, heat, and syngas. The liquid product is known as bio-oil, can be used as fuel or a chemical feedstock. The solid product is known as biochar, can be used as other materials, but also soil amendment and carbon sequestration. So next slide there, right? So the next one I'm speaking to is the plug flow, which is a very similar type of process as the previous slide. However, this one has the opportunity to use our existing facility, compost facility, and retrofit it. So the plug flow anaerobic digestion option is one of the possible ways to use to process green cart organics and leaf and yard waste at the Hamilton facility. The steps in this option are the plug flow anaerobic digestion treats the material in a continuous flow system. So you can kind of see that diagram as material goes through a tunnel. And if you look at that top picture, you can picture one of our existing compost tunnels actually being retrofitted into a plug flow anaerobic digester. So during the flow, the organic matter is degraded by anaerobic microorganisms producing biogas and digestate. The biogas is collected and used in a similar method as the previous slide, combined with heat and power generation. And there's also the opportunity to use pyrolysis for this method as well. So next slide. Now, the next steps to our strategy is we've gone through the initial phase of looking through all the options, including status quo and the options that I mentioned before. Now we're moving into a more detailed process of evaluations, evaluating the narrowed down list to select the preferred option. It's a lengthy process. It consists of a lot of detailed consultation with other groups and stakeholders within the city to get the most value from our engineering. Technology feasibility studies, and detailed costing. So as we go through that and prepare our that secondary report by the end of by Q3, Q4 next year, we will have the by September 30th our planned completion of our evaluations, and then we're coming to Public Works Committee in Q4 of 2024 with the recommendation from that report. This is all, this whole report all comes in, plays along in harmony with the solid waste management master plan that Ryan just mentioned, so that we have a planned avenue for our organics and considered all the options for renewable energy that are kind of pointed out in our climate action plan. Have those three things all come together for the beginning of 2025. So with that, that's my update.
Thank you for the presentation. Seeing a few questions here. Councillor Titus, start it off, please.
Thanks for that presentation, Glenn. So if we adapt one of these new processes, does that mean we're looking at the end of the free compost giveaway at Turner Park? Because I'm a big fan of that.
Through the chair, no, all of the compost that comes from those giveaways comes from our leaf and yard waste compost windrows at Glanbrook, so it won't be affected.
Thanks a lot.
Kevin, go
Okay,
ahead, please.
through the chair. So you have those two processes that you were showing the flow through. Any idea on which one has greater volume or best, like, which one is looking more promising? Like, we know what facility we have right now, but at one time, we used to bring in outside processing. So which one would have greater potential?
That's, through the chair, that is one of the main thing that we're looking at this next phase. So we know some solid parts of the puzzle. Now we need to see what other pieces fit in the best. So we know how much volume we get in leaf and yard waste and organics in each year. We know how well our compost facility runs. We know its capabilities. We know it's running very well at the moment, odor-free. So how do we maximize that asset and then also tie it in with other groups like the water treatment plant and tie in some of the goals from the climate change office as well. So definitely from that aspect, there has to be a look at what type of volumes are available out in the world as far as other municipal partnerships like we had in the past.
Very good. See no further speakers here, so I wanted to thank you, Glenn. Appreciate that. And may I please get a mover and seconder to receive all of the staff presentations, 7.1 to 7.9. Moved by Councillor Tattison, second by Councillor Wilson. Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Moving on to 8.1. 2020 Solid Waste Management Master Plan Action Items, 2021 to 2025 progress. I'd like to call upon Angela Story, Director of Waste Management, to provide an update, please.
You gonna be okay?
Oh, good. Is there any questions? If we could just do it that way. If there's any questions, why don't we do it that way? It's we've all read it in our agendas, so. Seeing none, so can I please get a mover and seconder to receive 8.1, moved by Kevin, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Sorry to put you on the spot like that. Are there any notices of motion today? Seeing none. Are any other items of general information or other business? Looking around, seeing none. And finally, I need a mover and seconder to adjourn. Councillor Tattison and Kevin. Any opposed to adjourning? No one's opposed to adjourning. Thank you. Have a great meeting, or have a great day, everybody. Thanks for coming to the meeting.